And then later in Georgia versus Gonzaga, we went over 1.5 3-point field goals for Blue Cane. Over 1.5 3-point field goals for Blue Cane. The early game, we got Louisville. That was a sharp side. Louisville on the money line. Louisville minus 2.5 and 3. Close with Creighton. It's going to be a 1-bucket game from what it looks like in the first half. A couple other things that we jumped on early. I probably talked about earlier. BYU at minus 2.5. That had gotten as high as 3.5. And then you saw some VCU money coming in late. So it looks like a difference of opinion on that number 3 between betting syndicates. UCLA, that's a sharp side for sure. I gave that out to subscribers as a 4% play at minus 5. That game will probably tip off at minus 6, especially at some of the square shops, because I do expect the public to come in on that side as well. Total for you, I think I gave it out earlier in the week, over 145.5, 45 and 46. VCU, BYU. And also bet over in that UCLA game with Utah State. So they do expect UCLA to be able to get the cover and go over, which isn't surprising. I think UCLA is just so much better than their opponent today. A couple other sharp sides. Missouri minus 6. Kansas minus the 4.5. Clemson minus 7 and 7.5. And real interesting game is Yale, Texas A&M. I talked about it before. Every time it goes to 7, someone picks off the 7 on Texas A&M. But there's so much Yale love from the recreational bettors and even some sharp guys I respect. They think Yale's going to be able to play them close, possibly pull off the upset. Some of the more one-sided public games for today that stick out, very one-sided. Early, it was actually on Creighton. Creighton was getting the money, leading all the way up to tip-off. In fact, that was the heaviest bet side of the early action, and then followed by High Point. For whatever reason, the public thinks High Point will give Purdue a run for their money. Drake, they like Drake a lot over Missouri. They're betting Drake money line. They don't think they need the points there. Montana seems to be a sexy pick. Public and sharps on Montana later today. And Wofford over Tennessee. Again, a lot of these double-digit favorites, you would think they'd be laying it, but they like taking the points. And in pretty much every game, even like Auburn, Alabama State, St. John's, Nebraska, they're not as one-sided as you would think, where, you would think the recreational players think it's going to be a blowout. They like to bet their dogs when it comes to March Madness. I was a little bit surprised at that, and I was also surprised at a lot of unders, where usually the bias is towards favorite and over. That just isn't the case, especially in round 1. I've been seeing mostly underdogs and under money. And it's not surprising. Everybody likes Cinderella when it comes to March Madness. Everybody's looking for that live dog. The one bit of advice I'll add real quickly, if you are betting dogs today, don't be afraid to sprinkle that money line. You have to. Now, I'm not talking about when you take a 32-plus point dog or 18.5 point dog. But if you're taking anything with 9, 10 points or less, you got to sprinkle a little something. And the lower the points, the more you should sprinkle. Like if you got a 5.5, 6 point dog, you got to put at least 10% of your bet on the money line, because this is that time of year where even though the higher seeded teams tend to win 7 out of 10 games, when the dogs do cover, they do so on the money line a lot. It's not like the point spreads come into play all that often.
And Dave, let's start right off the bat with where all the big money is going today and tomorrow, first round of the tournament.
Yeah, man. I mean, shoot, the action's pouring in. I mean, let me bring up the splits real quick here for you. I mean, the game that's going on now. We need Creighton pretty big. 67% of cash on Louisville, 59% on Purdue coming up, 65% on Montana. Not a lot of action there overall. Auburn, high spread, so I mean it's lopsided, but not a lot of action. Those high spreads hurt the overall money big time. Zags 58%, VCU 59%, Tennessee 63%, Yale 64%, and UNC Wilmington 58%. Everything else today is kind of split 50-50. They're close to 50-50. So Those are our biggest needs so far. But I mean, so much action comes in right before post. So you really can't, you got to take those numbers with a grain of salt, to tell you the truth. I mean, I'm looking at tomorrow's splits, and there's a fraction of the money compared to these games. Big games tomorrow so far. Let me see. Connecticut minus 5.5 is getting public action. Akron plus 15 is getting public action. Besides that, either the volume's low so far or it's pretty close to 50-50.
Let's talk about Arkansas versus Kansas today. And looking at my odds logic live odds screen right now, the money has come for the Jayhawks, minus 5. There are even some 5.5s out there. DraftKings, MGM is 5.5s right now. Total sitting in the 145.5 range. And I want to start with Kansas, all right? Bill Self's been there for 22 years. They've been in 21 previous NCAA tournaments. There was no turning the COVID year, obviously. This is the first time in that entire span that Kansas has not been a 4 seed or better. They're a 7 seed this year, and for reason. I think for good reason. They haven't been a good tournament team in recent years. They lost the opening weekend 4 times the last 5 years, all second round, but still not great. It's a Kansas team that they haven't lost in the first round since 2006, but they haven't been seeded this low since 2006. They're 6-12 ATS their last 18 games. There's no betting bandwagon. These two teams actually played an exhibition in October, and Kansas controlled it. But I'm not worried about anything that happened in an exhibition in October. I'm really not. And when we look at what the Jayhawks did, again, down the stretch, their starters were great. There was nothing doing when it came to the role players, the complementary players. And from a confidence standpoint, this is not one of the more confident Kansas teams that I've seen in the Bill Self era. Arkansas, look, they started SEC play. They lost 5 in a row. They had a bad loss at LSU. They were spending the last, month and a half. Every game's must win, must win, must win. And they were doing it shorthanded. They were playing without their starting point guard. They were down to 5 or 6 healthy bodies this past weekend. Well, now they got a couple of healthy bodies, or a couple of guys back. Most notably, the point guard, Fland, who's going to come off the bench here. It was key. If Fland was going to start, I wanted no part of Arkansas. But Fland saying, all right, I'm going to take a lesser role in this game, and I'm back on the floor, and now we have a little bit of depth. Yeah, I'm interested in the Hog side in this one. In my mind, Lawrence, Kansas feels like a false favorite. I think Arkansas is live to cover. I think Arkansas is live to win the game. Coach Cal, pretty good in spots like this one. And frankly, Arkansas as a program has been pretty good. 6-1 in first round games in their last 7 tries. I think they're live dogs today. I am a Michigan alumni. That being said, I got no loyalty whatsoever to the Wolverines program. Make no mistake about it. I've made a lot more money in Vegas betting against Michigan than I have betting on them over the years. So I oftentimes look for spots to step in front of the Wolverines because it's a program that I know fairly intimately. This ain't that spot. All right. Look, let me start with this. This line stinks to high heaven. All right. Obviously, there is a significant wise guy support for the San Diego Titans. They're a trendy underdog pick. They've certainly had an unbelievable season from a straight up and from a point spread perspective. But when I'm looking for step up in class games, how do I know this team can play with the big boys? Guess what? There ain't any. All right. What's their tough games this year? Well, let's see. I guess they played Toledo and James Madison. LaSalle, they lost San Diego State early. This is not a battle-tested Titans team. And I know they've put up some impressive numbers. And from a point spread perspective, anyone who's backed has made a fortune this year. They're 23-7 ATS. Those aren't necessarily the teams I want at this time of year, the times that made money for their backers all season and have built up an enormous betting bandwagon. And from the wise guys, they really have built up an enormous betting bandwagon because they've been an undervalued commodity all year. And even if they win the game, they're not undervalued anymore. All right. The markets have caught up for the Titans. And Michigan with the 2 7-footers, the argument that I'm hearing for San Diego around town this past week, Michigan's going to turn the ball over. Michigan's turning the ball over. Yeah, against Big Ten defenses, I don't think Michigan is going to have problems in terms of turnovers in bunches against the Tritons. And when you look at the Wolverines, 2 7-footers, 2 guys who play pick and roll with each other, I think it's going to be very difficult for San Diego to stop. So if I'm playing, I'm laying. That said, Lawrence, this did not make my card. I did not play the Wolverines in this game. I haven't bet them. And, I'm seeing 2s out there now. If I get a 1.5, maybe I'll get to the window with the Wolverines. I just think the wise guy support for the San Diego side it's a little bit too much for this better. There's value on the favorite. And I normally don't like the favorites coming off a scenario in which they just rolled through the conference tournament, look good doing so, built up a betting bandwagon. I'm not willing to lay double digits with teams like that in the opening round, but laying 1.5, if I get 1.5, I pull the trigger here. Even 2, I could only look at the Michigan side in this ballgame. Maybe they get upset. Maybe they go home. Wouldn't shock me. UCSD is good, but I think the value is on the favorite, not on the underdog.
Confused about
Baylor, Mississippi State, classic 8 seed versus 9 seed matchup. We appreciate the likes. We appreciate the comments. We appreciate the follows very, very much. Let me tell you how I approach games like this. All right. It's an 8 seed versus a 9 seed. The line open, pick 'em. They have 2 previous meetings this entry, by the way. One 78-77, one 54-52. So the 2 games decided by a combined total of 3 points. This game is going to be close. From a side standpoint, before tip-off, there's no bet. All right? There's no side here. That said, in-game, either team goes down by double digits. This is the type of game where the coach calls timeout and disgust. That's the team you want to bet on right there. Either team goes down by double digits, I would look to bet on them in live bettings. Both of these teams, Baylor and Mississippi State, have shown character for me this season. They're not going to quit when down or facing adversity. So I expect a back and forth game. I think from a live betting standpoint, getting either side +5 is worth a fortune. And I think maybe you'll get both if you do it live betting. I expect it to come down to the final minute, probably the final possession. And what do we want to do with NCAA tournament games that we think are going to be really close? We want to bet the under and pray for no overtime. But the tight games slow down big time. Second half, last 8 minutes, last 12 minutes. They're 1-possession games, and they not seeing anything going in fast break. And you can oftentimes go see 30 seconds, miss shot, 30 seconds the other way, miss shot. That's what the back end of these games can look like when they're really tight. So I like the under. I'm certainly looking at second half unders in a game that should be 1 possession. It's a big difference when you don't get that foul 3-pointer scenario in the final 60 to 90 seconds. 15 points of difference if a guy, easy. So looking at under, I'm looking at second half under, and I'm looking at in-game betting either team that's down by margin. I think that's the best way to play a game that I expect to be. It could be an early classic tomorrow. Should be a lot of fun on early start action on Friday. But that's the way I would look at it, Lawrence.
There we go. Teddy covers. What a segment, brother. Always love having you on. Best game breakdown person that we have. At least that's my opinion, Teddy. Many argue. Many put you in the bottom 3. I say you're firmly the number 1 better breaker downer that we have on the show. Guys, Teddy's coming into the madness on a 6-1 college basketball run. Brother, what do you got going for the clients today and tomorrow?
So we have a 3-pack, 4 hoops today, 2 in college, 1 in the NBA. We've got 5% big ticket up already for tomorrow, as well as a 4-star selection for tomorrow. We may well add more as well. But don't buy any plays. Really. Get on board with the package. The package is the way to go. You'll get every play every day through the end of April. Just $2.99. WT.buzz/TC.
Drake versus Missouri. Let's do Bennett starts over 1.5 made 3-pointers. Pretty simple press. Over in 11 out of 14 games, averaging 5.6 3-point attempts, which we love. Shooting 44.5% from threes. We love that as well. But the big selling point, Missouri, 213th in the nation in 3-point percentage defense. So he gets a really nice matchup. He's getting the volume, and it's tournament time. So don't expect these guys to be coming out unless there's foul trouble. So expect him to get a little bit extra minutes, maybe a couple of extra shots. So we'll take Sturts over 1.5 made threes. Very rarely do I come on here and talk about a spread, but the Brooklyn Nets getting 9 points against my Indiana Pacers is way too many. There's a lot of stats that back it up, but here's the big selling point, Prez. This is going to be the 12th back-to-back situation for the Pacers. They have not covered this spread in any of the second legs of back-to-backs this season. And they've lost a lot of them. One of them they lost by 9 points to this Brooklyn Nets team earlier this season. Pacers have needed some late game heroics to be just winning, let alone covering these spreads. So rest advantage to Brooklyn. Pacers not covering any spreads on the second leg of back-to-backs. I like the Brooklyn Nets to cover the spread tonight.
In the main event on Saturday, we've got Sean Brady. He's minus 165. In the comeback here, we've got Leon Edwards plus 130. Now, Leon is coming off losing the title to Bilal Muhammad in his most recent fight where, Bilal was able to do what he was able to do, implement the wrestling, push the pace, really, slow down and limit any of the offense that Leon Edwards had, and really forced him to be very timid in the pocket. You did see that Bilal was able to secure 9 takedowns of 13 attempts, and was just able to dictate the pace over those 5 rounds. Now, obviously, Bilal is the current champion. The guy is elite cardio, elite wrestling. But, it does add to the fact that, I think Sean Brady can implement some of those things, being a wrestler, being a guy that's going to push that path. Now, if he moves forward, pushes that wrestling pace, and wins positionally, I think that's where he finds success here. Also, Leon is a guy who's going to, back up. He wants to fight off the back foot. I think that's going to allow opening for cage pushing, looking for takedowns, looking for that opportunity for Brady to look those takedowns. And also, I don't know if this is a hot take, but, I'm not very high on Leon Edwards' takedown defense. The guy right now has been taken down 20 times over his last 4 fights. Now, obviously, high-level guys there, but it still opens up that path for Brady. And Brady, I think, is going to really force the issue here, look to push the pace. He averages 3.4 takedowns per 15 minutes. And over his last 4 fights, he secured 17 takedowns. So this is the spot here. I think that he's going to push the pace, positionally win. And when you're looking at kind of how this plays out, he's not a guy that's really someone who's going to knock anyone out. Over his last 17 victories, he's got 5 submissions, 9 by decision. His only 3 knockout victories happened very early in his career. The last knockout victory was back in 2014. So this is a spot, I think it's a double chance, submission or by points. You're getting a little bit better of a number here at minus 120, minus 125. And I think that's the spot how Brady gets it done in the main event. So we've got Mick Parkin, he's minus 120 on the comeback here. We've got Marcin Tybura, he is plus 100. Now this line opened up Tybura minus 145. And money has consistently come in on the Mick Parkin side, and I absolutely do agree with it here. I think there's multiple red flags on the Tybura side. I think the first thing is going to be that he's 39 years old. You've got Mick Parkin, 29, 10-year age gap. And even the fact that Tybura, he's not an explosive guy to begin with, but it just seems like, everything's starting to slow down. It's starting to tick down for him. I think his durability is starting to become in question. He's been rocked and wobbled multiple times. And plus, he's just very one-dimensional. He can't get the fight to the ground. He really, I think, is out of sorts there, where I like Mick Parkins here because I think the guy's going to be able to have, he consistently, is getting better, I think, fight after fight. But the boxing for him, I think, is where he's going to find the advantage here, really keep this fight standing, work at range. And a big advantage for him is the volume. He pushes out a really good volume for the heavyweight division. Tybura striking is absolute trash. And I think that he can keep this fight standing throughout this fight and just out volume him. But if you're looking at, competition-wise, Tybura does have the advantage when you're looking at competition. It's just that, he's been in the UFC longer. There are those things that obviously he's just been at the higher level, and you've got Parkin, who's kind of coming into the UFC, starting to build up. But guys that Tybura's beat, Blagoy Ivanov, he's 1-5 run in the UFC. Tuivasa, 0-5 run in the UFC. Even Jonathan Denise, who I think is an absolute fraud, still hurt Tybura, and then ended up getting the finish here. So I think this is a spot, clearly, it's one fighter's on the rise, one fighter is on the decline, and I think you're getting a pretty good price here still at this particular number here. Also, a sprinkle to close this out is that I do like that Mick Parkins does train with Tom Aspinall, the interim champion. That can only elevate a 29-year-old in this spot. So I am going to be going Mick Parkin here, minus 120, and I think he gets the job done.
First off, I like the New Jersey Devils in regulation tonight against the Calgary Flames. I'm anti-Calgary right now. They did beat the Rangers last game. This is the third game in 4 nights for Calgary. They're going to be tired. Plus, they suck. I like the Devils in regulation. I like the under in the Toronto-New York Rangers game. We were on the over last night. Close to 70 shots in that game. It was the right call, wrong result. But the Rangers can't score, guys, period. So I like the under in that game. And the play that I am singling out as my favorite free bet of the night in NHL is the Edmonton Oilers minus 130 on the money line against the Winnipeg Jets. This is a great spot to bet Edmonton. They were on a losing streak, and then they finally came out with a 7-1 drubbing over Utah, which, by the way, I like Utah in regulation tonight. But I just feel like Edmonton is going to go on a little bit of a run. And I know Winnipeg, one of the best teams, if not the best in all of hockey. It just happens to be a great spot for the Oilers. Take Edmonton minus 130.